Ahoy VC, welcome to the Personal Oasis. This is the Blind Island. You guys know what time it is. You see the night lights, you feel the ambience. It's time for a night train. This is the segment that we do at night, and we follow a train of albums, usually followed with some sort of theme or maybe a particular artist. And tonight, I'm actually going to be kicking off the first in a series of night trains. And this is jazz artists that I have a certain amount of, or like a select number of their discography. And tonight we're going to get started with the impeccable, imperceptible, one might say enigmatic genius that is Miles Davis. What more can be said about the man that hasn't already been said? He is a composing genius. He pushed jazz and other various forms of music into so many different places. He was incredible, and his voice is sorely missed in the music world. And I feel I consider myself lucky that I have even a select amount of his discography, and I'm going to be sharing that with you tonight, going with my earliest in his discography to the more contemporary. And I wish that I had some of his Prestige work. He was signed to the Prestige label before moving over to Columbia, striking it big, but I don't have any of that right now. So we're gonna just move on to my earliest in the collection that I have, which is no slouch. First one to be featured is Porgy and Bess. Now, this is his rendition of the classics from the operetta by George Gershwin, and he is working with Gil Evans. Created a number of fantastic albums with him as an arranger, and this is an original 6i stereo pressing, forgive me. And I personally like the stereo look more than the mono. It's a beautiful copy. And this is a great album. It's not one of my favorite Miles Davis albums, but there's a lot of beauty in these songs that Davis pulls out. It's the most lyrical that he sounds in my collection for sure. And maybe barring my next album that I'll show. But this is a fantastic record. And if you haven't listened to Porgy and Bess, I highly suggest you check it out. And really, really cool. Next up, one of the grails in my collection. One of the albums that I would take to a desert island, and one that I will never, ever, ever part with. And that is Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, mono, first pressing. This one is with the misprint on the back and the labels. Gave a different listing on the back here. And this is in such great condition. There's just a little bit of shelf wear to this record, but overall, fantastic copy. And this is an original mono 6i copy, and it just sounds beautiful. It's so nice. I mean, look at how clean that is. It's just like butter when it plays. It is one of the treasures, the crown jewels in my collection. Actually, some of my rarest albums, most expensive albums in my collection are jazz albums. And I mean, again, Nothing more needs to be said about this record. Everything that needs to be said has been said. It is seminal jazz listening. It's been listed as #1 on multiple lists of greatest jazz recordings of all time. And I highly suggest if you haven't listened to it, then what are you doing? You gotta go listen to it. It is a phenomenal record and one that I'm so blessed to have in the collection. All right, and then next we have Sketches of Spain by Miles Davis, joined again by Gil Evans, and this is such a big, giant, bombastic sound, almost cinematic in scope, and marrying that beautiful Latin sound, kind of a godfather of fusion sounds, really. And this is an original 6i stereo copy. This is in really good shape as well. Really, really nice. And I love the liner notes that are on here. Again, Miles Davis sounding lyrical and beautiful on this record. And this was released in 1960, very shortly after Kind of Blue. And this guy was just coming out with masterpiece after masterpiece. It was incredible. It's amazing that he was able to keep up this pace. So next I believe this is the second album from his second great quintet. This is what's playing in the background right now, and it's Miles Smiles. And don't let that kind of goofy album artwork fool you. This album is full of thick, interesting lines. This is post-bop at its best, and also the players on here: Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, and Tony Williams. All of them went on to have prolific, huge careers in their own right. And we're already coming out with some huge hits at the same time, even prior to this. So this is just 5 people coming together who are at the top of their game. Incredible album, and one that I love putting on late at night. It's a great late night jazz album. One that also makes you feel a little bit more intellectual, sophisticated. It's not so straight ahead. It does have its zigs and zags. It makes you work for it a little bit more. And this is kind of, there are jumps that Davis takes, and this was definitely a jump for Davis. He had created modal jazz, now he's pushing into post-bop, and soon he'll be pushing out into even stranger, more electric places. But this is a fantastic record, and I highly recommend anybody who hasn't listened to this album, give it a shot. It's a little bit more of a sleeper in his catalog. It's not usually in the top 3 that are listed, but damn if it isn't amazing. And then, this is the first kind of electric album, maybe not to Fearless Day Kilimanjaro, but this is Miles in the Sky. And this is a transitional album, for sure. It's not full of the classics or the hits that would be coming later on, but there's a lot of great stuff here. It seems like he's working out his ideas. I liken this album to Bob Dylan's Another Side of Bob Dylan. He's testing in new ideas. Not everything has landed quite yet, but he's almost there. And he's up in the air, he's up in the sky, and just about to fly. So it's really cool to see him transitioning into new, crazier places. And this is a cool album to grab, not usually one that's as expensive as some of the others, so highly recommend that you try and find it. All of these albums are recommendations. They're all fantastic, all killer, no filler. So a really cool album. And then next we have his first true foray into fusion, and that's Miles Davis in a Silent Way. This is an original 2i stereo copy, and it sounds great. This is when he was teaming up with Joseph Zawinul and John McLaughlin on guitar. It is a wonderful sounding album. Tio Marceo is bringing the heat as far as being a producer. It is one of those records that takes you to a different atmosphere. It sounds alien. You don't get things like Brian Eno and his strange ambient works without this being the cornerstone. Miles Davis was transcending genres, transcending the limitations of what was conceived as jazz. And man, did he look cool doing it too. I mean, look at that cover. It's fantastic. Next is a very difficult record to wrap your head around, and that's Miles Davis' Bitches Brew. This is, either people are gonna say this is his masterpiece or his greatest folly. And it really depends on what spectrum you like to go on. After this, it's kind of no holds barred. He just goes balls to the wall, almost atonal, and just really focusing on deep grooves and weird soundscapes. And it is an amazing piece of art. And if you haven't listened to it, challenge yourself. Give yourself some time with this record. It will grow on you. And this is I consider this to be a very rare copy because it is in original 2i stereo that's in excellent condition. You just don't see copies of this in good condition at all. Sleeve is probably VG, but the vinyl is in great shape. And I'm so blessed to have this one in the collection. Great record. Next is Miles pushing even further in this fusion, and this is Miles Live Evil. These were compilations of recordings taken from his live sessions and live concerts, sometimes spliced together and turned into completely different types of music. And again, it's very much in the same vein as Bitches Brew. Even looking at the cover, it has the same artist, and it just keeps on pushing into new and drastic territories. So very cool live album right here. Semi-live, I should say. Then we have his funk masterpiece, Miles Davis on the Corner. And this is when Miles Davis was trying to break through to kind of the youth market, the youth culture. And what he does is he just bases everything around groove and works around that groove. And he also is just, this is like foundational for, the beginnings of hip hop, krautrock, everything that was to come after this. He was predicting the future like 20 years in advance. This guy was on another level. And this is a great album. If anyone hasn't listened to this, again, what are you doing? Get on it. It's so freaking good. And finally, I have Miles Davis, Get Up With It. This was kind of the end of his classic period. He had pretty much burned out on drugs. He had gotten into a car accident, and after that he went quiet for a long time. Made a resurgence in the 80s, but it never sounded quite the same again. And this was kind of a compilation album. Took cuts from his Jack Johnson sessions, Bitches Brew, On the Corner, and a couple of newer compositions as well. but this is such an incredible piece. It's very scattershot. It doesn't necessarily flow as well as his other records, but as far as the scope, it's like his White album. He just is doing everything and anything and just transitioning so quickly. It's so hard to keep up with him. And I love this record. It's so freaking good. Love it. So that concludes my Miles Davis collection. Again, he's a jazz artist whose influence and impact cannot be understated. An incredible jazz trumpeter, jazz composer, and influencer of the highest sort. Now guys, what did you think of the collection? What are some other albums that I'm really missing? I know I'm missing a lot. Let me know what your personal favorites are in the comments below, and I hope that you have a great night on your own personal oasis. Cheers.